just a really dumb, silly, like no commentary, no personal anything, no politics or anything, like just very dumb, silly, like, yeah, headstrong, I'll suck you off. Headstrong, I'll suck off anyone. You know, and it's just like a bunch of guys just like riffing on that dumb idea. And he just like has been nonstop like TikToking about them, commenting about him. He's like, seems like the Twitter people who hate me are on TikTok now too. And he's just like beefing with his fans and his comments like every day. And I said, I don't know why you don't block the guy. Like he just like mercilessly beefs with everybody and anybody who says anything about him. And he was like making a bunch of videos about like, oh man, I can't believe they make these kinds of jokes on this app that's for kids. When it's like, dude, didn't you get banned off Twitter because you were saying how it was cool if like teenage boys had sex with their teachers or something? Like that's why you got banned off Twitter.
Yeah, he loves it, I think. I think maybe there's a bit of masochism going on, and then just also not being that bright. So he just I don't know, to pretend to know the inner workings of the guy from Trapt's mind, probably folly. But didn't they kick him out of the band?
Is he officially kicked out? I'm confused.
I thought I heard that.
I mean, if that is the case at this point, I feel like it would only be better for the band because, like, vocally, you could probably replace that guy with just about anybody. And it seems like he only spends his time being like utterly toxic on the internet and just kind of like souring the good name of Trapt, frankly. Like I feel like he's really like burying the band in the ground, and the band is becoming more known for him feeling like teachers can have sex with their teenage students than they are known for Headstrong.
Souring the good name of Trapt is really funny. Is a really funny concept. But yeah, that is exactly, I guess, what's happening. It's funny that you mentioned his voice because we did a couple festivals with them in the early 2000s. And at one of them, he was talking to a couple of our crew guys and maybe a couple other people backstage. And he told them that he was or had forever changed the way that people sing. And yeah. And
sorry. Keep going. Keep going.
And your reaction was exactly the reaction of our crew guys. They started laughing. They thought he was fucking around. And then they quickly realized that he was being completely, it was an earnest moment for him. And yeah, so I don't know, man. There's a whole lot of delusion going on over there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like really thinking about like all of the legendary vocalists of that, you know, decade or that time, like of the late 90s or just the 90s in general and the early 2000s. You know, you think of like Durst and Chad Kroeger and Chris Cornell and freaking Kurt Cobain, and then it's Trapt guy. Like he's right there. He's like right there with all of the, you know, major vocalists of that era.
He's at the very top of the hierarchy, for sure, when it comes to influence. Yeah.
No, for sure. All right. Guys, obviously we've kind of gone into the banter a little bit, but just to put a formal intro on it, thank you very much, anybody who's in YouTube land, but obviously on Twitch as well, for tuning in and watching. We are about to have an amazing conversation with the frontman of the alt-rock band Eve 6, Max Collins. We're going to be talking about music industry bullshit, and more. Many of you may be familiar with those Eve 6 hits back in the day, but they also have some newer music out as well that we're going to talk about. And Max's infamy on Twitter also is a discussion in and of itself that has almost like breathed new life and interest in some of the band's doings as of late, and has been a discussion on many a interview and blog post. So we're going to be talking about all that and more. Thank you for everybody in chat coming in to hang out. And I mean, let's get into it. I mean, we talked about Trapt Guy already. But let's get into the music a little bit with some of the latest stuff. You guys dropped this Grim Value EP just toward the start of the summer. It's got a couple of songs on it, and listening to it and kind of comparing it with the output of some of like you know your last records that you dropped. I mean, would it be fair to say that you're kind of going back to some of your punk and pop punk roots a little bit on this collection of songs?
Yeah, absolutely. I think. I mean, yeah, we were always kind of a band that when we told people our influences and the records that we listened to, you know, growing up, we made the first couple of Six records when we were very young. They were always sort of shocked, and kind of rightfully so, because, well, for probably like a convergence of reasons. One being that we were extremely young, and we're very much at the whims, I think, of you know, labels and producers and stuff like that. Not that we were even having our arms twisted to necessarily do anything that we were outright opposed to. We were just so naive. Our first time in the studio was making the first Eve 6 record that, you know, would be the record that people would have this, you know, association of sound with. But John and I, our guitar player and I, we grew up much like, you know, the Needle Drop as record shopping music nerds, very much immersed in rock and roll subculture, and yeah, at the same time, also I think listening to the radio, just not telling our friends we were, because growing up in the 90s was like very different than now, in that you sort of had to like pick a thing, pick a type of music or a genre, and identify with it wholesale. And I mean, that was okay with me, but I also found myself, you know, listening to the radio and getting, you know, caught in a vulnerable moment, like listening to Hey Jealousy or Lightning Crashes and shit like that. So anyway, yeah.
You know, funnily enough, that is a song that like repeats kind of often for me from that era. And you know, it's really just like the vocal performance, the angel closes her eyes, that like really sells me on that track. And I'm not usually into that kind of rock, but it's like such a it's such a dramatic fucking statement. It's
such high drama. Yeah, you kind of have to respect it. But yeah, so I think with this new record, again, for a bunch of reasons, John and I found ourselves in a place where, well, there weren't any expectations about the band. You know, we've been pretty much forgotten about, and personnel wise, and again, just extraneous factors and people in the mix who had sort of been the loudest voice in the room for a time, had been excised from the band. And John and I were like, let's make the dumb punk record that we've always wanted to make. And why not? And that's what we did. And we really had a good time doing it. And just after we got those first 5 songs that comprise Grim Value, we continued to write, and we have another full length that shares some of the attitude, I guess, and aesthetic of Grim Value, but kind of gets a little psychedelic and a little more kind of 60s vibes in it, while still keeping kind of a punk thing going. So yeah, basically whenever I hear a band say, yeah, we're just doing exactly what we want to now, it's like, well, why weren't you always? You know, that always kind of begs a little bit of suspicion. So, you know, I'll center myself right in the middle of that critique and say, yeah, I hear that argument. But for a bunch of reasons, both on our sides of the street and other sides of the street, that's not how it played out. And here we are now making dumb punk records in our 40s. And I like to say that I think punk rock is the most dignified form of music that anyone can play past the age of 40.
What about freeform jazz? Is that pretty dignified past 40, you think?
No, man, that's the stuff of Philistines, man.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, no, it's punk rock in your 40s is 100% the way to go.
Got it. You know, I was thinking about as to your comment, how raw and irreverent some of the tracks and even commentary on some of the songs, where there was that lyric where you were slagging on the Strokes a little bit, that kind of caught my attention. Like, go into, I guess, the ethos of that particular track, because like you really kind of seem to be taking a lot of things to task lyrically on that song.
Yeah, I think you're talking about a song called "Can We Combine." It's the second song on Grim Value, and yeah, it's in a way it's kind of a love song, it's a bit of a horny love song, but it's kind of about finding beauty amidst the rubble, the neoliberal hellscape, and in this case, it's with someone who is just kind of unapologetically themselves. That's sort of the subject of the song that I'm singing about. And I was in a new relationship when I was writing that record, and was feeling quite inspired in that way, I guess. But I've never really written love songs, and a lot of songs that sort of portend to be love songs don't work on me in that way, because they feel like they're sort of signaling something about the singer more than they are tapping into what, you know, the mess that love really is, or something like that, and getting to it in like an authentic and visceral way. So with that track, and I Want to Bite Your Face Too, I think that's what I was attempting to do, kind of in the tradition of like the Smiths or something, where there are turns of phrase that are macabre and kind of depressing, but underneath that he gets to the sentiment of love better than someone who's just saying, I love you, I want to be with you forever, baby, kind of thing. The Strokes, I actually love the Strokes. I kind of love the Strokes from a distance, I guess, in a way. Like I enjoy listening to the records, but I guess my hot take about the Strokes is that like that guy can't really write a melody, and I think that's part of the reason why they're good. They kind of like, there's just this kind of droning, kind of meandering vibe that sort of sucks you in. Even though my tastes normally run to like songwriters, and like he's not one really to me. He's like something else. But yeah, I think the Strokes are great.
Well, to kind of rewind to what you were saying earlier about your output with Eve 6 when you guys were less experienced and coming out with your first records and in the studio for the first time, and there sort of being you know, that critique that you were answering in a way, and sort of like you know, accepting as like, well, why weren't you always making the kind of music you wanted to make, yada yada yada. If you could, from your own perspective, would you be able to go into maybe what at that time, you know, we're talking like, you know, the 90s rock band breaking into the industry, so on and so forth. You know, would you attribute, you know, that sort of being the mode that you were guys writing in mostly to your youth and lack of experience, or were there certain like, I guess, settings or expectations within the music industry at that time itself that would have driven the band or other bands in a certain direction or to go for a certain sound? And if so, what like were those pressures, and do those pressures feel any different now in sort of like the digital age, the streaming age, the, you know, almost like a post hip hop becoming the zenith age?
Yeah, I think the songwriting part was very much that was something that, being green and inexperienced, just having like a total unworldly kind of guilelessness of being like a teenager that doesn't know shit about shit, but for some reason has this impulse to make songs. None of that stuff was really colored by extraneous factors. It was more just that we didn't know how to make records. We sort of had some influences we could cite, but they weren't going to be taken seriously by the record company or producer. So yeah, no, I mean, like, I think part of what made that first record and that song resonate with people was the fact that it was, so there was such a naivete about it, and about just kind of where we sat at the time. You know, we weren't like trying to really be anything other than like let whatever, for me as the songwriter, let the words kind of appear and sing them. And I think like I didn't really have much of a melodic comprehension either, just because I was so new to writing songs when I wrote those records. So I think I kind of relied on phrase and meter, sort of like the rhythm of the words in a lot of cases, because of just a lack of like melodic prowess or something like that. And would just cram like 900 words into a verse and stuff like that. Yeah, I don't know. I think there are, like, if I had my way and the records that our first record sounded completely different, maybe no one would have cared about them. You know, it's one of those things. I try not to run the counterfactuals too much, because it's sort of a waste of time. But like, I have the whole thing kind of neatly compartmentalized, I guess, where it's like, okay, I have pride mingled with embarrassment about those first few records. They also allowed me to be able to do rock and roll for a living, keep the lights on, feed my kids, you know. And now we're in this place where, you know, maybe we don't have quite as many people paying attention, but we are able to just be our, be ourselves, maybe to a fault sometimes, but make the records that we want to make, talk the shit we want to talk, and and have this sort of strange and marginal second act is like, it's okay with me.
You know, another thing that I wanted to kind of get your perspective on the music industry and the way we consumed music during that era. I mean, you know, even you saying that during a certain point in time, you needed to like identify, you know, holistically with like whatever style of music that you were listening to. And maybe to younger viewers and listeners, that means like, oh, you know, okay, like maybe that means like you're just really into rock. And it's like, no, I mean, you needed to be like, you know, either a punk or like a metalhead or a this or a that. It got super hyper specific. And if you were in those worlds, you weren't like traversing casually into rap music or traversing casually into EDM or, you know, electronic music or whatever. Like things were super defined culturally in terms of like the stuff that you listened to and who you hung out with and where you heard certain things and where you were able to get a hold of certain things. And you know, I very vividly remember that point in time where music and entertainment and media was just like all pre-internet, because I mean, it's like
Yeah.
a lot of my adolescent media consumption happened during that MTV era. Which is why I have, you know, vivid memories of hearing your old stuff on the radio. But like over that course of time, one phenomenon that I think is like really changed is like, you know, something that people used to talk about all the time back in the day, in this sort of like idea of the one hit wonder. And, you know, how that's not so much a thing these days, because today, like, nothing dies. Like, you know,
Yeah.
people who had like their huge major hit, they just sort of like continue their careers on either within the industry or even independently, just until I guess they just feel like not doing it anymore, which I feel like is kind of cool. It's like always refreshing and
Yeah.
exciting that is, you know, that people sort of have the option to do that if they so choose. And, you know, there's like a lot of discussion about sort of like what makes for a one-hit wonder, why certain bands were one-hit wonders back in the day. And I feel like a lot of that responsibility is put on the artist itself, as opposed to the way the industry was operating at the time. And, you know, in your own perspective, like a lot of those bands that sort of came out with one track, it was beloved, and they sort of fell to the wayside. In your own view, is that due to a lack of ideas, a lack of talent, or the industry kind of like consciously deciding we're just going to chew up and spit out a series of artists and bands over this decade like gum, and, you know, just like kind of run through all of it and try to throw as many Marcy's playgrounds in front of people's faces to always kind of create a new sensation and kind of keep the industry, you know, flowing that way, as opposed to like honing in on talent and trying to foster things over years and years and years?
Yeah, I think God, the vast majority of the time it's the latter point. And it's funny that you brought up Marcy Playground, because the last tour that I did before COVID was like a solo acoustic run with John from Marcy Playground, Chris from Fountains of Wayne, and Art from Everclear. And like most people, I'd only ever heard the Sex and Candy song. And getting to hear his other songs every night, and songs that were off subsequent records that nobody heard, I was like just baffled and dismayed that he's such a talented guy. And but yeah, I think that really was the model at the time. It was, you know, there was still big money in record sales. And it was kind of the tail end of that. And yeah, I think labels were signing everything that they possibly could and seeing what stuck, like you said, like gum, and what didn't. And yeah, and it was very much on to the next thing. I don't think there really was, I don't know when artist development as a concept died, but I have a feeling it was like decades prior, maybe not decades prior, but at least 10 years prior. So yeah, I think that had a lot to do with it. Not to take away all responsibility of the artist. I think for us, we had that, you know, or me personally, I had that very predictable kind of like arc where after having, you know, the first couple records come out and do well, then putting out the third one, and it was clear that it wasn't doing well, and having to navigate like relationships within the band and the record company and everything else, that in hindsight, if I could go back, what they required was confrontation and sort of having like the self-confidence to not compromise. I didn't have that equipment at the time. So what I did was drink, you know, and kind of run from it. And it was like, oh, I'll show up, I'll do the thing, but I'm no longer putting my heart and soul into this because it's just too painful, which is cowardly, you know, but it's also exactly what happened. And yeah, so I kind of retreated into the bottle, and that began on the tour cycle for for record one when we were barely of drinking age. And we did have good management at the time who actually, it's crazy to me when I recall this now. It's almost like, how could this even be true? But our manager did call me on the road and was like, this is when we'd been out for like 16 or 17 months or something nonstop. And he was like, it's come to my attention that, you know, your drinking has really become a problem. People in the band are worried about you, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to put this to you now. You know, you have a choice, and the choice is finish the tour sober or you're coming home. And I was like, oh, I'm fucking coming home. Like, there's no way I'm going to fucking get on stage without, you know, that kind of protective layer or whatever. So that shit started early, but it came to a head when it converged with the declining success of the band. And, you know, it's all, you know, a very familiar story, but, yeah.
I mean, you know, in terms of it being a familiar story, and, you know, being someone who was operating in the circles that you were at the time, in your experience and estimation, were other alternative rock groups who were kind of cut from that similar cloth or kind of operating in that same area? Were they going through similar experiences?
I know, I know some must have been, some that I saw, and I guess this is sort of part of the pathology of when you are kind of an active alcoholic and you look around at other people and compare them to you and always find a way to tell yourself at least a story about how they seem perfectly fine and like they're enjoying themselves. Why can't I, kind of thing. And that's not to say I didn't, you know, have a fucking blast also, you know, like it was a lot of things. But yeah, I mean, I think any level of fame, not that ours was stratospheric by any measure, but for like a young person who doesn't really have experience as to how to navigate it and is using substance to help, it's just like a recipe for disaster, you know?
And I guess at what point did you find yourself kind of like, you know, digging out of that hole? You know, at what point did you find yourself kind of like reconciling, you know, these issues of addiction and kind of like the current state of the band and the artistic output, and I'm sure a changing music landscape as well, and just reach a point of like stability and perspective?
Well, after the tour for record 3, I was basically like, I can't do this anymore. And we broke up the band. And I spent the next, you know, God, that would have been 2003. So I got sober in 2006. I spent the next 3 years, like, just, I got this like obsessive thing where I felt like I needed to like read all the books that I was supposed to have read and hadn't. So I went through this, like, literally this obsessive reading and drinking and smoking cigarettes phase that lasted for 2 or 3 years, where I didn't do anything else. I didn't have to. You know, I was still pretty comfortable financially, and but still drinking a lot. And I guess I had plenty. There were plenty of instances or whatever that should have been like my rock bottom or whatever, that just weren't. Getting arrested and all of the things that you would think, I guess, might be the catalyst weren't really. It was much more of it was just like this sort of I don't know. One day, it was Mother's Day. Actually, it's kind of a corny story, but it's true. 2000 what 6, and I can't remember if I was really drunk or really hungover. I think I was really hungover. I was at my parents' house. I couldn't look my mom in the eye. I was like shaking. And I was just like, what the fuck am I doing? And on that drive home back to my place, I just had this kind of overwhelming feeling that if I didn't make a change, that I was really headed for disaster. And my brother at that time had like 6 months sober. I called him up and I said, I'm going with you to a meeting. I did. And somehow I've stayed sober ever since. The band started to play again live like a year after that. But there was a long chunk of years that were sort of a creative purgatory for me. And maybe that's what it needed to be, because I really focused on my sobriety more than anything else, to the detriment of making music, and maybe even to some relationships that I kind of unceremoniously ended. But I really took that thing extremely seriously and kind of made it my life. And I think that's probably why it stuck, No,
I mean, it's interesting to hear that story and your progression past that point. And obviously some stuff needs to take priority. And it just makes me, again, kind of like think about how things are current state in the industry where, as I was saying earlier, artists sort of have like this elongated sense of existence as long as they can continue putting out, music on the internet. But simultaneously, with the saturation of everything, everybody seems like so much more replaceable. And it seems like some artists aren't really getting like those wake up calls that maybe you got at one point, like sort of on tour, because, very tragically over and over and over again, a lot of young fans are kind of getting used to this story of like, so-and-so goes out on tour, they get a hold of some bad drugs while out on tour, and then, before you know it, they've OD'd or they've passed away, or, they've gotten in trouble with the law or something like that. And if like, the ultimate worst thing happens to them, it seems like the music industry is like completely ready to be like, bam, posthumous record out in like 6 months. It's like completely thrown together. All the fans, all the fans hate it. It was produced like awfully, and anybody who ever enjoyed the person's music like has no respect for the record whatsoever. But yeah, it's like it's coming out so fast, so soon, and it seems like the game is not to take care of anybody or make sure that anybody stays around. It's more to just like capitalize on whatever happens, whether that is like a death or somebody gets sent to prison or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the music business has always been cutthroat and cynical.
To what you're saying, I guess that's kind of the question. Like, do you feel like that's intensified over the years, or this is just like kind of a different shape of the same thing that it's always kind of been?
It's a good question. I don't know. I feel like every young artist who's starting to have some success and have their career go needs some guy. I'm going to sound like such an old man, but like needs a mentor figure, needs someone who can kind of keep them honest and tell them shit they don't want to hear, because it just comes with the territory that you start to accrue a whole lot of people in your personal world who tell you exactly what you want to hear, who don't challenge you on anything, who support your most self-destructive tendencies, who cheer it on, who like bask in the glow of it. And it's really toxic. I don't know. I don't know if it's gotten worse, because I just think back to, dead rock stars, go way back.
Sure.
But yeah, I have a lot of sympathy for people in that, you know, position, just because I see myself in them and not knowing how to navigate any of that stuff. And why would you? Like, why, you know, why would like a kid know how to put things in their right place when fucking everything is coming at you? Like, you know, it would take like a literal saint to be able to traverse that well. I do think maybe, you know, I do feel like there are a lot of cases like the ones you just cited. Then there's the other extreme, which is like a lot of artists who seem kind of like almost robotically careerist, which doesn't really sit well with me either. But it's better than dying of a fentanyl overdose. Yeah, it's also interesting what you say about streaming and how that has allowed artists to kind of prolong and even forge careers outside of, you know, the bigger kind of machine of major labels and stuff like that. And that is definitely like a net good that has come from streaming. There's a lot of really good shit that has come from streaming. I just wish the streaming services would pay artists fairly.
That I think kind of quickly can go into maybe a conversation about some of the stuff that I saw you tweeting that maybe kind of initiated the reach out you were talking about. You know, a musicians union, and you know, do you feel like at this point such a movement could even be great enough or be powerful enough to force like the streaming industry's hand, because things have become like so saturated and yet also so separate, because literally anybody and their mom could upload a single to Spotify tomorrow. So I mean, as a result of that, how do you like create a cohesive, I guess, like, you know, coalition, you know, between enough people to really like gain some momentum in that kind of, I guess, climate where if, you know, the place where everybody's employed in a way is the streaming service, and you have countless people crossing that picket line every day, you know, like how exactly does it work?
Yeah. I mean,
and not to say that I have the answer either. I don't, you know, and I
yeah.
support those efforts, obviously, but I'm just sort of like thinking as a musician, you know, yourself, it's like, you know, how exactly do you think that thing could prosper?
Totally. No, it's a great question. And just to be clear, like we and the musicians union as well are not calling for a boycott. Yet. But and I think what another thing that makes even the notion of a boycott tricky is that most artists don't own their masters. The record label does. So even if we did want to pull records 1, 2, and 3 off of Spotify, you know, RCA or whatever the owning group is would say, fuck no, like, you know, we control this. And the labels are very happy with the symbiosis.
The way it's all currently working.
Right. Because the agreements that they made, all backdoor and non-public, and that's one of the things the musicians union is asking for, is to make those dealings transparent, because they aren't. They're kept purposefully obscure. They try to keep as much. I mean, this is part and parcel of the record industry in general, but keeping things as complex as possible, as complicated as possible, and obscuring them in that way, it really benefits them.
No, it's true. I think one of the most disingenuous and confusing things about that whole side of the industry is the labels and streaming services, especially Spotify, are like collectively agreeing to put out this facade that every artist that we work with, no matter what, it's all just a flat rate. We're all just agreeing that, you know, so-and-so artist gets whatever cut of whatever streaming. But when you actually listen to what certain artists are saying they're getting from their songs when they're streaming them, that's very clearly not the case. Some artists are clearly getting better cuts than others, and some artists are clearly getting like the worst fucking cut that you could imagine in terms of like their streaming royalties. And, you know, there's been no explanation as to like what that sliding scale could be and who they're valuing over who and who has leverage to negotiate those numbers and who doesn't.
And I think to your question about what would it take to move the needle, you know, I'm in some ways I'm like the worst spokesman for this stuff because it's
you're just a man giving your opinion. That's all.
Yeah. But I think it's like massive artists now or new signings now that have clout and some power on their side are able to negotiate. Like for a band like us, whose first 3 records still, you know, Eve 6 still gets over 100 million streams a month on Spotify, from which we see like basically nothing because we don't own those masters. And we weren't in a position to be able to negotiate for something when we signed our record contract that didn't exist yet. So
is that from that position, it sounds like you were just basically grandfathered into a shit deal.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. So I think what it would take would be for artists who don't have as much skin in the game, maybe, who don't have as much to lose, who are financially comfortable and therefore less interested in maybe causes in general, to get loud about it. We're definitely not in a position now, the union, where we have sufficient power to get things changed. But I'm also not fatalistic about it, because more and more people, I mean, I see it on Twitter. I see it in the way other artists engage with me on the topic, are sort of, I think, starting to kind of wake up to the fact that these are exploitative practices, that even if people aren't feeling the hurt now, you know, they will. And especially in a fucking pandemic, when you have removed from you basically the only viable source of income from being a musician, which is live shows. That's fucking all we got. And so, and that's like, shows are kind of coming back now, but there's still all this uncertainty in the air. Like, you know, we have a tour that we've started to book for October. But it's like, for a band of our level to book a tour, spend the requisite money on, you know, whatever logistical shit, buses, not plural, but like transportation, you know, hotels, crew, all of that stuff, to then hit the road and have shows get canceled would be like devastating. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's a total like unraveling of everything.
100%. Yeah.
You know, to what you were just talking about, it's almost like, you know, and obviously like, I'm not like trying to rub in the tragedy of it, but like, you know, on the music industry's part, it's almost like the perfect heist in a way, because like a lot of that music that, you know, that you guys and many other bands of that era had made, it's now reaching classic status. You have a vast audience of obviously older listeners, but still very vast audience of people who are looking to digest that again because they want to get back in touch with that time. And most likely, you know, maybe their Eve 6 CD didn't, you know, live its best life in their CD booklet and got scratched to fuck, you know, or whatever. So the only option they have is to like listen to it on streaming or something, you know? I mean, none of my, like very few of my CDs from that point in time have lived to today.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's just kind of the nature of like a physical media that you might have had bumping around in your fucking car or whatever. You know, we didn't take the best care of our CDs back then. You can attest to that, I'm sure. So,
Absolutely.
So as a result of that, you have like all this classic catalog, and I see those very popular 90s playlists, you know, all over Apple Music, all over Spotify, all over wherever. And because the audience is older and maybe not as technologically savvy or not as hip as to how the music industry operates now, it's difficult to even go to that bully pulpit and be like, hey, we're like really getting fucked on this streaming stuff, because a lot of them don't even know how the sausage is made and don't really care and aren't like, you know, trying to take time away from their wife and kids or whatever to like, you know, get involved or do anything about it. So it's really like a rock and a hard place that a lot of bands in your era are like placed in, and you know, are put in a position where they could just be totally taken advantage of.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a lot of will and moneyed PR power that goes into, again, keeping it all really obfuscated and complicated, to have the effect be, oh, that's too much to think about. Convenience wins. You know, it's like another, like, there is so much that's good about the platform, like, or about the way that it operates, what it allows, being able to have the world's fucking music catalog at your fingertips, and also for you know, like music discovery. Like, streaming allows for young people also to find a band and access it without, you know, without any trouble. So it's like, and a band like that benefit, or a band like our earlier records are discoverable by young people now too. That's another good thing. And, you know, we have a much better deal with the records that we're putting out now on an independent label and stuff like that. But it would be, you know, foolish to think that our 5-song punk record is going to get anywhere near the streams of, you know, the songs that had the full might of, you know, record company power in the late 90s.
Well, you need to get a song that pops off on TikTok is really the sauce now. Is really what
that's
it takes.
The sauce now.
Yeah,
it's true. What my friend, do you know Field Medic, the artist Field Medic?
No, not off the top of my head, no. Okay,
he's incredible. He's a really, really good songwriter, but like that exact thing is happening for him now, and it trips him out too. But it's also incredible. It's like he did just a 30-second a cappella song that's called "A Song I Made Up to Stop Myself from Having a Panic Attack," and it's just like an iPhone recording, and fucking virality, and, you know, fucking crazy shit.
It's weird how it's weird how the virality works, and then also like how localized it can be and feel on there, because there's a kid who I was talking on there, ADHD brain, I forgot to follow up with him, and this is a reminder to probably do so at some point this week. But I was talking with a really cool kid over there who I'd never heard of him. I've never, you know, and I'm looking at my comments all the time. I've never gotten a request to review his music or talk about it, but off of just a song of his going viral on TikTok, he has a platinum song. And I'm like, you have a platinum song?
Insane.
And he's like, you know, there's pictures of him on Instagram with the fucking plaque. And I'm like, you have a platinum song off of a viral TikTok track, and I've never even heard anybody utter your name to me, which is just crazy, you know?
Which is crazy because of how tapped in you are to everything that's going on too. I mean, I find myself having those moments all the time when I'm like talking to someone, or, you know, an artist gets brought up and I'm like, never heard of them, do a little bit of recon, and it's like they are, you know, huge. You know, and maybe it's again in like this sort of very specific zone or something. Maybe huge is the wrong term, but you know, they have a fucking impressive listenership. And yeah, it's insane, just the quantity of stuff. Whereas when, I don't know how old you are, but like for me, like growing up in in the late 80s and 90s, it was like you didn't have any volitional power of choice, really, especially if you weren't like coastal elite, and like didn't have cool record stores and shit like that. You you got hit over the head by the same 19 songs 19,000 times a week, and you didn't choose it. It was served to you. And sure, there were people who recoiled from that, but there was also, it's like, and obviously my band was part of that whole thing. Now it's just this completely different landscape, which is fucking awesome in a whole lot of ways. I mean, thank God our music tastes aren't all at the whims of like some fucking,
radio program director. I was just gonna say program director at a radio station.
Yeah, yeah.
some clear channel yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, speaking of landscape, I wanted to quickly ask you just like what you feel about, I guess, the era of rock that you came up in, and I guess like, I don't know where that culture has gone to, if you can even kind of call it a culture at this point, like where the audience is currently at mentally, because it's really odd. It seems like a lot of the bands from that era in a weird way are split on the COVID thing. It seems like also that there are some artists from that era that are seeing like kind of like a weird renaissance with younger people, like with the recent, festival performances. A lot of people seem to be like really obsessed with Fred Durst now and his new look and everything. I mean, do you feel like some of this stuff is due for a comeback in a way, or, a resurgence?
I generally tend to think of nostalgia as pretty poisonous. I do think there's, like, for me, I did have kind of a come to Jesus moment with new metal. Whereas when that, in real time, when that stuff was happening, the second Eve 6 record was coming out, we had made a very much standard tuning, pop rock, synth laden, Duran Duran influenced record that would come out to compete with Kid Rock, Papa Roach, Limp Bizkit, all of them, right? And playing festivals with those bands felt like going to war. It was like, so not only did the music to me sound like just a complete attack on my senses, and I just had this visceral feeling of antagonism when I heard it, but also we were like having to share the stage with bands like that, which was a literal nightmare. And it's funny now, and I'm kind of glad for the experiences now, but like the worst case was at a festival in Phoenix, and I think literally all the bands I just listed were playing. Maybe not Limp Bizkit, although we did do some festivals with them, but definitely Papa Roach, Kid Rock. And we went on, and the audience fucking hated our guts, as you would expect. It was the time of, testosterone rock.
Absolutely.
And yeah. And they
I remember going to a few Ozfests over that point in time. So it was like, basically like the vortex of that.
100%. The audience somehow had access to bags of ice, and we were used to, by that point, taking like, cups and whatever, the plastic Bud Light bottles and stuff like that, which weren't too big a deal, but ice, with the right throwing arm can really do some damage.
Really fuck you up.
Yeah. So we were just under full assault, just a deluge of fucking ice getting thrown at us. Most of it missing until it didn't. And like I got my eyes sliced open. We were probably playing fucking Here's to the Night or something like that. You know what I mean? I don't totally remember. But I noticed there's blood just streaming down my face, playing to just a sea of 40,000 middle fingers. At least that's the way I remember it. You know what I mean? We finished our set, which I'm proud of, but that was the context that I heard and experienced this music in, and I fucking hated everything about it. Hearing it now, I feel like a lot of people are appreciating Limp Bizkit in sort of this detached, ironic way. That's not the way I am. It's like,
yeah.
When I hear those records now, I really do hear, and maybe it's because everything has gotten so smoothed out and fucking patron friendly or something, but I hear in it, embodied the spirit of rock and roll. I hear fucking abject stupidity and danger, and that's good. Like, I like that shit, you know, as long as I don't have to share a stage with them. So, yeah, I think time is a weird thing, and it has a way of forcing a kind of objectivity on you. At the same time, I'm wary of fetishization, I guess, of the past. And I don't think nostalgia is good. I don't think it's good for any aspects of culture, really.
Yeah, I mean, I looking back on that era and being somebody who was like a prime consumer of music in that era, like there was definitely something to it. You know, I mean, I feel like it wouldn't have caught on as hard as it did if it didn't. But like, if it does come back in any way, shape, or form, I guess I would prefer for maybe some of the sounds to come back, and maybe not so much the culture of all of it to come back, because it was all like, you know, the whole thing was like almost like experiencing or being like a soldier in this weird war over nothing. And obviously, like within that spectrum of artists, you have like such varying sounds and ideologies when you're talking about like a System of a Down versus like a Disturbed or something like that. But like,
totally.
But speaking of Disturbed, for example, like when I saw them once at an Ozfest stage, I remember like they were ginning up this really weird energy in the crowd, where at one point in between some songs there was like some stage banter, and it was like, everyone, we're in the middle of a war right now, and everyone was like, yeah, and he wasn't talking about like, you know, the war in the Middle East. He was like, it's, you know, metal or it's like pop music, and everyone's like, yeah. And it's you know, even at the time,
that
like,
was the dude,
that was the war. That was the war. And like, you know, while I just like any other teenager my age, like thought NSYNC sucked. You know, simultaneously, like it seemed like, I don't know, this seems like pretty big in industry as well. You know what I mean? Because I was also into punk music at the time too, and a lot of the underground bands that were on the bill that weren't really like getting, you know, the prime stage status. And I don't know, it just seemed like a really weird position to take and sort of like drum to beat in front of such a large audience, playing right before like, you know, the Black Sabbath revival set. Yeah.
It was that whole thing was such a silly,
very
concoction,
very
such a sad LARP of a cause that also had like no music history awareness about it. I remember that was the whole thing with all of those bands, like Korn, and all of those bands would deride the boy bands, and it was like this weird music industry fucking who cares you know, battle. And it's like, and the whole thing was, oh, they don't write their own songs. It's like, well, how many fucking great artists in history didn't write their own songs? I'm not trying to compare NSYNC to I don't know, take your
Frank Sinatra,
your Motown. Yeah. But like, but it's a really silly, you know, argument to fucking get up in arms about. Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, it was a very stupid time in music. I guess I feel like part of me, I think stupid is good, or can be good. And I think even the theater of, I don't know, like inventing a feud like that can be harmless enough. But with the state of things such as they are, I feel like a rock and roll band with any sort of attention, really, if they're going to be, talking about something resembling a cause, there are a lot of fucking actual causes they could be talking about. So yeah, if it comes back, maybe we get some fucking politically aware new metal. On second thought, maybe that's a terrible idea. I don't know.
Thinking about that, it seems like I don't think these days rock and roll is necessarily like more or less dangerous than it used to be, but I feel like people are just like a lot less phased by shit than they used to be in some respects. There's still like some pretty ridiculous controversies out there right now. Like, it's beyond me as to how for example, Lil Nas X is getting as much heat as he is just for being openly gay, but that's another conversation. But having said that, I feel like we've kind of moved past this point where you have that kind of disturbed banter on stage and it gets a reaction, where even you have like, over that course of time, I'm sure you even remember like Marilyn Manson being as, virulently anti-religion as he was, and he'd get up on the stage and he'd have almost like, the preacher's, sort of lectern set up, and he'd be like banging on a Bible, and, he'd have like the symbol and everything. And it was something to that. It was something.
There was something to that. If that happened now, it would be quaint.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, who cares?
We've kind of gone beyond it, or gone beyond a point where the audience has like a really a reaction to it. Kind of the closest thing I could think of in metal right now is like the band Ghost, for example. But the thing is, like, even the way that they go at religion is like more theatrical. It's like more dramatic than it is like some kind of hardcore statement that they're trying to like shove down your throat, But with that being said, now that we've kind of maybe moved past that point where those types of messages get a reaction from people, do you feel like rock has an opportunity to focus just more on the artistry of it, as opposed to how are we going to manipulate the audience into thinking a certain thing?
Yeah. I think that's an interesting point. Yeah. I mean, I think on the whole, I guess this is just summarizing what you just said, but it's like, it's harder to be countercultural now. Even a statement like against religion now sort of doesn't feel so much like it's going against the grain. I mean, it's like, sure, in some ways it is. I'm not trying to, diminish that there's still like power there or whatever. But if we're talking about culture and moving against that, it seems like it's sort of difficult to do. I do feel like, I think now is an opportunity for, I don't know. I would love for rock and roll to like have another very strange and sort of like confusing avant-garde phase, where you can't immediately identify and name exactly what's going on. I just feel like with a lot of music now, I very, very quickly I'm able to sort of, there's not a whole lot of mystery about it, and I enjoy being confused, I think, just in general by art, whether it's film or music or whatever else, because that is for me what kind of simulates like a dream experience and gives you that sort of feeling of something transcendent is happening. Like that's where the magic is for me. And it seems like, yeah, a lot of things I hear now, it's just I can way too readily and easily kind of like put it in its right place. And I don't like being able to do that.
Do you think that's because of just sort of the state of things where they are creatively, or just you being at a point where you're just so experienced that you just kind of know what's what right now?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's similar to like, yeah, it's like being able to take off the fucking nerd fucking professional hat or whatever. There's probably some truth to that. I do, it's like I can't watch theatrical movies about rock and roll. Like they're comedies to me. Like the Queen movie was just like, and part of that is probably because, yeah, I have some experience, with that world and that life. I think there's some of that, but I also think, yeah, I don't know. I want to be careful not to just be like, old man, fucking get off my lawn about it. But I want to hear more shit and be like, and have to pull the car over and be like, what's going on? I don't understand this. I don't have anywhere to put it. The last time I remember that happening, to be honest with you, was with Amy Winehouse. Hearing Rehab, and I was like, what the fuck? What's going on here? But that's not true. Sleaford Mods, who I'm a huge fan of, have that effect, and they're a relatively new band.
Yeah, they have a unique energy, and they're confrontational too. I've loved their music. I've positively reviewed their music, but we've also bumped heads as well.
Oh, good.
And yeah, I feel like that's the best position for anybody to be in. You don't just want to be on. You don't just always have ever been on their good side, but you don't just always ever want to have been on their bad side either.
Absolutely. I mean, and dude, yeah. And hopefully they did it in a way like I do think this trend
they were mad over a review. It is what it is.
Yeah, no, that's great, and that's fine. But you also see this kind of trend with some like really big artists where they feel entitled to like positive reviews. Like the whole St. Vincent thing was weird to me. It's like, you need to respect the ecosystem, and like criticism is important, and criticism is an art to me, and you're good at it. And yeah. And I think that needs to be respected. That doesn't mean that you need to like all like Sleaford Mods, clapping back or whatever. Like, that's great. That all falls under the umbrella of entertainment. And
honestly, it just makes the internet more interesting for a day. So 100%. if it does that, then good.
Yeah, that's the sane perspective, I think.
Yeah, no, that's how I feel about it. Look, and not to say that this this point needs to be made, because it's happened before with other artists, in regards to my reviews. But look, if they come out with a record 3 months from now that blows me away, I'll be happy to suck that record's dick.
Yeah,
to take it back, I guess like one more time before we head out. Well, even before that, to kind of stay on the current conversation. Even if you're not necessarily like having to pull the car over when listening to something, there have to be some like current bands in the underground or younger bands that are at least interesting to you at this point. No, I know you guys have done a little something with Bass Drum of Death, if I remember correctly. Are there any other groups out there kind of operating more on the underground side of things that you think are doing some cool stuff that, you yourself just find yourself casually listening to and enjoying?
Yeah, absolutely. And the Bass Drum of Death thing was really fucking funny because he came at me on Twitter and kind of started beefing with me. and I was like, who is this motherfucker? He's like quote tweeting me and like talking a bunch of shit.
Internet beef can lead to good places.
Yeah, it can. And so the first thing I did before I unsuccessfully battled my impulse to fucking quote tweet him back was look up his music, and I was like, God damn it, he's good, motherfucker. I was so pissed.
Right, it's easy.
Like,
it's easier to respond when their music sucks.
Exactly. It's like, but no one wants a symmetrical war, man. Yeah, and I was like, dude, this kid is fucking clearly listening to music that I love and interpreting it in a way that is like wholly unique and very much fucking spirit of rock and roll. Like I heard the Black Angels in there. I heard some Dandy Warhols in there, bands that I really love. And he's a younger guy. And anyway, that beef was very short-lived, thankfully. And he DM'd me an apology the next day saying he was like drunk, stuck in a bar in a snowstorm or something like that. And that he used to like wait with, wait for, Inside Out to get played on the radio so he could record it. And it was a really sweet message. And I was like, dude, if there's anyone I have sympathy for, it's the drunk, no hard feelings. And 3 days later, we finished a song together called what was it called? Eve 6 Bass Drum of Death. You were right.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's one. Another band that I've recently discovered, again through Twitter hijinks, is this band called Virginity. Mm-hmm. And so when we released Grim Value, the new Eve 6 EP, there was a fuck up, and the fifth song on the record was the instrumental version of the song. There was no vocal on the song. There was some fuck up with the distributor or something like that. And I was like, oh, fucking great.
Oh, there you are.
You got me back?
Got you back.
We still here?
Yep.
Okay. And I was like, oh, this is pretty embarrassing. So my guitar player, John, was actually like, dude, you should say, like, if there are any bands out there who want to take the track and make the song their own song, tell them to do it. And if there's a good one, we'll release it as a collaboration. Mm-hmm. And this band, Virginity.
Oh no, you're gone again. Now you're back.
This band Virginity made a completely fucking new song out of it, and it's so much better than ours. It's like this, I don't even know what I'd call it. It's like they somehow made this like sort of sensible 3-chord punk song into like a noise scream thing. And they didn't even add instruments. Anyway, it's really fucking good. And so I've been listening to some more of their stuff, and they're great.
Okay.
And a festival that I'm not allowed to announce that we're on, because we're doing some really goofy thing where we're going to be revealed as a mystery guest. So like, we're definitely not on this festival, but if we were to be on this festival, we would do the Virginity version of the song with Virginity and have Virginity come up on stage and sing it, but we're not playing the festival.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you for the non-information there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome. You're welcome.
Really quickly, just like to get a quick thought and opinion on this. Like, generally speaking of the 90s, before you go, would you be able to let me know, just like really fast, what you feel like is the most underrated band of that era and what the most overrated band of that era is?
Yeah. Most overrated band, I'm gonna have to go with Radiohead. And I know this makes people really, really angry.
Are we talking entire catalog or just 90s output?
We're talking, honestly, I can do without the entire catalog. I'm not gonna lie. There are a couple songs, again, a couple of those songs that have caught me a couple times in a vulnerable moment. I'm not gonna, give them the pleasure of citing those songs. I know they're very concerned about what the guy from Eve 6 thinks about them.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, not a Radiohead fan. Most underrated. I mean, it's hard for me not to go with one of my favorite bands of all time that no one has heard of.
Go for it. Go there.
Okay. They're called the Mises, and they put out, I want to say 3 or 4 records, the best of which is called Greatest Bible Stories Ever Told. The singer's name is Joe Meese. I've met him, and he's just one of the strangest. He's lovely, but he's also like, he's got those eyeballs. He's got the acid eyeballs where you can tell he's just fried like 300 too many times.
Is this MISES? A few people in chat.
MEICES.
Okay, a few people in chat wanted to know the spelling. Okay,
yeah. Greatest Bible Stories Ever Told is, for my money, one of the best fucking, it's sort of power pop, but it's sort of drunken in the way that maybe like Dinosaur Jr. is or something. But yeah, it just has that feeling, and that record in particular, of just enough control, but it's fucking veering off the rails. It's about to careen over the cliff kind of thing, but all the while with some craft, like songcraft. It's just, that's like, for where my tastes run, that's like the fucking ideal. And their third record was called Dirty Bird, another great record produced by, what's the guy's name who produced the Pixies, Trompe Le Monde. I'm gonna forget, but also a good record.
We know the record.
Yeah, we know the record. Also a great record. Tastes Like Chicken, also a great record. But if you're going to check out the Mises, check out Greatest Bible Stories Ever Told. Play it extremely loud. And the song you want to start with is Don't Let the Soap Run Out.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we have internet sleuths watching. They are going to be checking it out right now, I'm sure.
Hell yeah.
But yeah, I mean, to the Radiohead point, to say something is overrated doesn't necessarily mean it's trash or it's bad. It's just that it's a little overly hyped. And I agree with that point as well. I mean, look, I love and I own plenty of Radiohead records. There are some albums that for me, I think are kind of underwhelming and non-starters. Obviously, I don't care for Pablo Honey, and I'm not even really into the Bends either. Like I'm not really into those records at all. To me, as far as like rock
I respect
music,
that. I respect that take more than the other.
Well, I mean, it's like the other take, and a lot of bands are subject to this take. Tool is another band, for example, where it's like, we can't just like them, or we can't just enjoy them, or we can't just like respect them for their best output. We have to worship. We have to worship, and we have to buy into the narrative that they're the most profound band of all time, which probably even Tom York himself wouldn't tell you that.
100%. And I'm glad you made that distinction, because when I say this stuff, I mean, part of it is just, I'm a fucking Irish
shooting from the hip
contrarian, and it's fun for me to be a muckraker, but I'm also a person who really does kind of believe that taste is a choice, and that you can decide to like something. You can like open your heart to something and make the decision to like it. Sure, there are cases where that won't be possible, but often there are. And so when I'm doing these critiques, first of all, I'm having fun with the fact that I'm the guy from Eve 6 critiquing the guy from Radiohead, which is on its face already a funny premise. But I'm also doing it with a background of like the utmost respect for honestly any band that's been able to make a fucking get into the public consciousness somehow. And like, really, I'm not just saying that. And I also don't really have like, I think it's important on one level to know what you like and know what you don't. but I think it's sort of confusing those levels to say that those opinions are immutable or unchangeable. And just in my own experience, this has happened countless times where I'll hear a fucking song that I hated, but it'll catch me in a moment in the line at CVS or something like that. And I'm like, holy shit, Black Balloon by the Goo Goo Dolls is fucking heavy. It's a slickly produced replacement song. And okay, maybe that's outrageous and sacrilegious, but you know what? Like it moved me, you know? So, yeah, that's sort of the place I'm coming from when I do these absurd takes.
No, I mean,
that I can admit are absurd.
Even I'm not a Goo Goo Dolls fan, but I myself, I can't deny their pull for some people. I think one of my, most funny online memories of dealing with any fan of anything when I was first starting to review stuff was YouTube, when like the messaging interface actually worked, and as a creator you could go into it and actually like get some feedback from the people who were watching you. This guy sent me a message who was just like really concerned with the lack of Goo Goo Dolls oriented content that I wasn't doing. And he just like wrote me this really long impassioned message, which, just like talking about every member by name and the specific thing that they bring to the band. And he constantly referred to them as the Goos, because obviously it would be redundant to type the Goo Goo Dolls over and over and over. And I mean, it's that letter and that message and the energy coming off of it just like really sticks with me to this day. That some people are just like really, some people are just really into shit, and you have to respect that.
Totally.
Yeah.
It sounds like you might have found the world's most adorable guy. That's really cute. But yeah, I like hearing some of those songs. That's another band that I just immediately wrote off upon hearing for the first time in real time or whatever.
Right.
But yeah, time is weird, and it has a way of shifting and fucking warping perceptions. And yeah, some of those songs really do sound, I don't know if it's because everything, or not everything, but things are often so like sort of smacked to the grid and vocal tuned and everything else, that when you hear a song that has some looseness, it kind of goes to your heart muscle.
Sure.
A little bit more.
No, it's true. And, even some songs that hit today have that quality about them too. I mean, lots of people right now are going crazy for this Anderson .Paak, Bruno Mars, Silk Sonic thing that they're doing right now, where it's just like totally 70s soul with super lavish instrumentation. And I think like even a lot of younger listeners are really excited and feeling just like refreshed to be hearing something that feels like so warm and so vintage and so classic, like right out of the gate, because a lot of the aspects of that music, a lot of young listeners, unfortunately, in terms of like current mainstream stuff, are just deprived of it. There's a lot of cool stuff going on in the mainstream, but there's definitely something about that era of music, the organic sound of it, that is kind of missing. And it's great that they can kind of bring it back in their own way. Before I send you off, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't sort of just like ask you to, in brief, go into a little bit what exactly kind of started you on this progression from becoming not just the Eve 6 guy, but also like a pretty notorious internet shit poster on Twitter as well. Because now it's like you're almost like kind of juggling these two, like I imagine like really heavy crosses to bear, and you're doing it really well.
Thank you. Much to the chagrin of some. I'm admittedly an overposter. I've sort of been riding a manic wave in some sense, I guess, since like December. But I have a lot of fun doing it. And yeah, as to its beginnings, my I guess initial reason for wanting to go to the Eve 6 Twitter, which I haven't really ever done, and post was that, yeah, we had this 5-song EP that we'd made that wouldn't come out until much later, because we ended up taking some time with like what label we were going to do it with and all that stuff. But you know, the criticism that does get, you know, thrown my way sometimes, that was based Drum of Death's criticism, was, oh, you're a cynical actor, you're just doing marketing or whatever, which is funny in a lot of ways, because like, fucking, it's Twitter. That's like, you know, there's a whole lot of marketing going on Twitter anyway. But yeah, it was, if you want to call it cynical in that way, it was, but in such an absurdly small way, because my purpose was just to let our small listenership know that we were about to be active again. And I had no idea that the shit was gonna go viral, obviously. So once it did, I just sort of saw it as an opportunity to be be myself, I guess, and kind of lean in to and maybe expose a lot of the absurdities of, I guess, rock and roll in general, certainly my band, certainly the music industry, centering myself in the critiques enough that I think generated enough goodwill and sort of permission to be able to lob some, you know, water balloons over the ivy walls of like the actual rock stars. And yeah, so that's it. And has it been good for the band? Yeah, you know, it has been. And that's great too. You know, it was and is a source of fun and amusement for me, and also a way to get out the odd serious thought from time to time. So I enjoy it.
Well, man, thank you for coming on and just being an open book about everything, and talking about the present, talking about the past, and just being a great guest.
Dude, it's been a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me on.
And keep us up to date with the new record coming out and the psychedelic turn it's going to take. Yes,
for sure. New single should be coming out in the next, like, I would say month or two. And we also have a music video for I Want to Bite Your Face coming out on Wednesday.
Okay, sounds good. And think about the TikTok thing. Get you know what? Get all those songs, get a bunch of videos out on TikTok. Do it.
Dude, let's fucking do this. You know what? I'm a 42-year-old you know, rocker with an umbilical hernia, and I'm coming for you, TikTok.
You know, look, I'll say this, but before you head out, like, obviously there is great reward in just like relentlessly and just like unapologetically shit posting on Twitter. It is, as long as you do it within the confines that wouldn't get you banned, there's pretty great reward for doing it on TikTok too.
You know what? I'm not going to lie. You're people have brought this up to me.
I'm making sense. I'm making sense.
You're making a case.
All right. Thank you very much for coming on, man.
Thank you, Anthony. Right, appreciate it, man.